Joe Rogan has called UFC fights for over 2 decades. He has been cage-side for championship battles, legendary knockouts, and the most significant nights the sport has produced across its entire modern era. He watched the Mandalay Bay overflow with Irish fans for McGregor vs. Aldo. He was there for Khabib vs. McGregor. He called Anderson Silva's career-defining performances. When Joe Rogan says something was the greatest night of fights he has ever witnessed in 20-plus years of calling combat sports, and that nothing else comes close, that is not a hyperbolic content creator reaching for engagement. That is a man with more reference points than almost anyone alive telling you something genuinely happened. The main event was the greatest fight of all time. That is what he said. Not one of the greatest. Not an argument can be made for top 5. The greatest. Ilia Topuria, in his view, is the most skilled fighter of the new generation, and the new generation is the most skilled era in MMA history. Topuria was at the top of that mountain. And Justin Gaethje, at 37 years old, as a 6-1 underdog, on the most scrutinized stage the sport has ever built, dismantled him round by round until the corner stopped it. The tactical breakdown that Trevor Whitman provided in the post-fight period is the most complete explanation available for how the game plan was constructed and why it worked. Start with what they identified as Topuria's core offensive weapons and how to deny them. Topuria is a front-heavy fighter. He shifts his weight onto the lead foot constantly, which is how he generates power but also makes him predictable in terms of the step he has to take before he can punch. Whitman's plan was to control range by staying 1 or 2 inches outside Topuria's effective range. Far enough that Topuria has to take a step before he can punch, close enough that Gaethje's jab can still reach. When Topuria starts loading onto the front foot and shifting, the target is the rear eye, not a typical jab, but a driving punch over the shoulder that forces Topuria onto his rear foot and disrupts his base. The goal was to put Topuria on his rear butt cheek repeatedly, not through explosive exchanges but through systematic range control and jab placement. The specific things they wanted to avoid were equally specific. Topuria is very good at following if you angle out to his left. He can open his step and follow with the right hook. He has a shoulder switch when he pursues that allows him to go almost southpaw with the right hook. Against a bladed stance like Topuria's, you need years of experience understanding the shoulder roll to deal with that specific threat at close range. Whitman identified these as the no-go zones and trained Gaethje to avoid them even when the chaos of a live fight created the temptation to engage there. And when they ended up in those positions anyway, as Whitman acknowledged happens in any real fight, the damage was limited by the prior preparation. Rogan's observation about the crowd is the detail that everything else from the night sits within. He said he could hear 85,000 people from inside the venue. He said it was insane. He described it as the wildest experience in 20-plus years of calling combat sports. And his specific framing, not a once-in-a-lifetime event but a once-in-anybody's-lifetime event, is the right framing for something that has never happened before and will not happen again. A professional MMA event on the South Lawn of the White House, on the president's 80th birthday, with a result that produced one of the biggest upsets in the sport's history, in a fight that both men will be remembered for the rest of their lives and probably longer than that. The setting and the fight matched each other in a way that almost never happens. The eye-poke detail that Gaethje raised in the post-fight Joe Rogan conversation is worth documenting because it has not received enough attention and because Gaethje himself said he is still upset about it. At some point in the fight, Gaethje received an eye-poke. He was asked if he was good. He said yes, he was good. And then he and Whitman discussed afterward that the question is wrong. The protocol should be you have 5 minutes, are you ready to fight, can you see, do you need a doctor? Not are you good. Are you good is a question that produces a fighter response, which is always yes, I'm good, because fighters are trained and conditioned and motivated to say they are good regardless of what is actually happening to their body. Gaethje said the shot felt different afterward, that his face felt strange, and that he had been rushed back to fighting without the full recovery window the protocol is supposed to provide. He was pissed at the referee for it, and he was pissed at his own corner for letting it happen. He said after the round ended he walked over and told his corner to get their heads out of their asses, that their job is to protect him, and that they had just let him get hit with a huge shot. The corner told him to go to his stool. He sat down and then let it go. But he still brings it up. Conor McGregor's analysis of the fight from his position at the Joe Rogan face-off with Holloway contained a specific observation that has proven accurate in retrospect. Topuria was walking forward with his hands down, and he was flat-footed. McGregor said he knew it was going to happen from watching the training patterns, that you have to get it put on you in the gym, That you need to pay people to drop you so that you have the psychological architecture for when it happens in a real fight. His comparison to his own situation, that he has only bled his own blood once inside the octagon, was not boastful but analytical. He was pointing to an experience gap that manifests specifically in how a fighter processes serious damage over multiple rounds. Topuria had never been in that position before. Gaethje had been there more times than almost anyone. The faith element of Gaethje's post-fight conversation with Rogan is the part of his story that gets least attention in the analytical coverage, and perhaps most explains the specific quality that made this performance possible. He talked about his parents making him go to church every Sunday and the relationship with God that came from that. He talked about how when you are on drugs or living a certain lifestyle, nobody expects anything from you and there is no pressure, and how understanding that made the pressure of living a disciplined life feel like the right choice rather than the hard one. He said he has known throughout his career that he could not take the easy way out. And in the context of a fight where he told himself he was going to lose so that he could reach his most primal competitive state and dig deeper than his opponent expected, the foundation of that capacity to go to that place is a belief system that makes the depth of the well larger than anything physical training can produce alone. You cannot manufacture that. You build it over years of choosing the right thing when the wrong thing is easier. Dana White's reaction to the retirement question was the most commercially significant piece of post-fight media from the organization's perspective. He said he would never tell Gaethje what to do about retirement, but he said if he does go out this way, having beaten an undefeated champion at the White House at 37 years old, it is an unstoppable moment. And then he added the thing that changes everything. On the flip side, you just beat an undefeated badass. Decisively. What does that open? The implication is that a win this significant does not close a career, it reopens one. Every major matchup in the division becomes available. McGregor, if he beats Holloway. Tsarukyan, the mandatory challenger. Topuria in a rematch. The pound-for-pound implications. White was not telling Gaethje to keep going. He was describing a landscape that makes keeping going genuinely compelling. Rogan's summation of Topuria's performance is the most important piece of framing for how the loss will be historically remembered, and it is generous without being dishonest. He said Topuria's heart was never in question. He rejected the idea that Topuria quit. What he said instead was that Topuria's body simply could not do what his mind wanted it to do, that when you cannot see, and when you have been that battered, sometimes the smart decision is to stop. He said Topuria is a very smart guy, and he thinks Topuria realized there was nothing left he could do to defend himself without vision. He called it preserving his body and his brain to rebuild and come back another day. That framing, the decision not as failure of will but as intelligence acknowledging physical reality, is the framing that allows Topuria's story to continue with dignity intact. Gaethje felt the momentum change before anyone else could see it. That is the final piece of the tactical picture that Rogan described and that the post-fight analysis has confirmed. He said experienced fighters can recognize subtle changes before anyone else notices. A fighter backing up a little more, reactions becoming slightly slower, the eyes not tracking punches the same way. He said once those signs appear, momentum can swing very quickly. And once Topuria started finding his back foot in the third round, Gaethje knew something was different. He has been in enough of these situations to know what it looks like when a fighter is starting to go. And when he recognized it, he accelerated. The jabs started landing more consistently. The body work continued. The face that had been recognizable at the start of round 3 was unrecognizable by the end of round 4. What happened at the White House on June 14, 2026, was not a fluke. It was not a lucky punch. It was not a young champion having a bad night while an old champion happened to survive long enough to catch him. It was a game plan, executed under pressure, by a man whose faith and character and 20-plus years of accumulated wisdom about what it takes to survive these moments produced the specific internal state required to beat the most dangerous fighter the division had seen in years. Trevor Whitman designed the attack on the rear eye against a front-heavy stance and trained for it for months. Justin Gaethje told himself he was going to lose and found his primal state. The setting was the White House. The result was history.